This ship has several different nicknames. Some players like to call it the Space Shoe, some players like to call it the Space Potato, and some players like to call it the Space Whale. I personally like to call the Dominix the Space Whale, after all it does kinda look like one. Now it will be very interesting to see how the Dominix 2 will perform. After all, last time I used this ship, it was, I think, before the implants were released, and a lot of things have been changed since then. Advanced large drone operation bonus will give you plus 45% drone damage, plus 5% drone optimal range, plus 5% drone tracking speed, and the advanced ballistic command bonus per level will give you plus 10 kilometers optimal range per skill level. Overall, a very nice drone damage bonus. 5 drones for high slots, 3 medium slots, 6 low slots, 3 combat and 3 engineering rigs. 85,000 hit points is the defense. The Dominix is primarily a armor tank. 7,379 gigajoule is the capacitor. 883 seconds is the recharge time. 21.74 gigajoule per second is the recharge rate. It can lock 7 targets. The Dominix is surprisingly not a slow ship. After all, Galata ships are known to be quick, and they're also known to have some decent armor or armor repair capabilities. So let's take a look at the build. So this is a long range build that you can use in low sec, null sec. You can also use it in high sec, although for high sec I will show you something a little bit different. The large cruise missiles have 109 kilometer range. Although the cruise missiles have good range, they are good only against big targets. They will not apply a lot of damage to the smaller ones. 1 web, 1 scrambler, 1 large neutralizer. I have medium drones installed. You can use medium drones, light drones and heavy drones, and even sentry drones on the ship. They all have the bonus. They all receive the same bonus. After all, the Dominix has a bonus on all drones. In the low slots, 1 microwave damage control, adaptive hardener, 1 armor repairer, 1 drone navigation computer and 1 drone damage amplifier. Overall, it does seem to work really well this way. And here you can take a look at the armor resistance. This Dominix is a armor tank, and it even has some armor rigs. And speaking of rigs, let me show you the rig setup. I have dual drone speed augmenters, and there is 1 integration for armor resistance and armor repair. Only 1 such rig is installed on this ship. In the engineering rigs I have 2 capacitor rigs, capacitor control circuits and 1 auxiliary thruster. And the stats on this ship do look okay. Now for the nanocore, I have the illusionary ghost nanocore, mainly because it makes the ship look awesome, and since I like to record ships to look good, and the nanocore makes this boat look really nice. That's the only reason why I have the nanocore. It's not upgraded. However, you have a lot of nanocores to choose from, and you have nanocores for tank, you have nanocores for speed and DPS. Basically, you can pick whichever nanocore works best for you. I personally recommend the Concord core or the blue or green nanocores. They are very easy to obtain, and they do give you some very nice stats. The nanocore doesn't have to be something expensive. After all, the player skill and the pilot skills are a lot more important than some nanocores. But we have a lot of nanocores to choose from, and all of them will work really well. Okay, now as for the implants, here is where things get interesting. Now the Dominix is using drones. It is a drone boat, so drone bombs or the bombard tactic is the way to go. And with this implant, for PvP, you can use the 300% bonus on the secondary. For PvE, the remote reload is a lot more important. And as for the general units, I will go with the damage, and I think I will also go with the drone speed. Drone damage and drone speed is the most important aspect for a lot of drone boats, especially in low sec and in null sec and for PvP. The Dominix is one ship that can be very difficult to tackle with a small ship, because the Dominix can have some terrifying DPS. It has a lot of drones, so the Dominix is killing frigates, destroyers and cruisers very easy. In order to tackle one Dominix, I personally recommend a heavy resistance build tackle Stratius, or a Celestis cover tops with dampeners, so that it can't lock anyone by the time the main fleet arrives. Overall, a very scary ship to fight, if of course the pilot knows how to use the ship. 1,600 DPS with the medium drones, and with the large missiles 7.4 kilometers per second is the flight velocity, 85 kilometer is the drone control range, and the drones are again very quick. You can do a build like this, which is more for PvP, dual drone damage amplifiers, a capacity battery, adaptive armor hardener and a damage control. For big ships you can use the large drones. They will do a lot more damage than the medium ones, and they should be able to track big targets very easily. The light drones can be used, and it is actually recommended to use them against interceptors, frigates and cruisers. Some cruisers like Bellicos or the Ortus will take heavy damage from light drones, and you can also use a build like this with triple drone damage amplifiers, 1 adaptive and 1 damage control. And you can also swap the capacitor battery instead of the armor hardener, that way you still have that crazy DPS. And the build that I really like for PvP is this one: quad drone damage amplifiers, a damage control and a micro warp drive, 2288 DPS with the large drones and with torpedo launchers. This build is specifically designed to combat large ships like battleships. It can fight with battlecruisers, although generally speaking the main target with a build like this would be big ships. After all, the torpedo launchers and the large drones might have a issue to hit the smaller targets, but with the drone bombs you should have some crazy DPS. Don't forget, you get a 300% DPS boost with the drone bombs if you don't use the remote reload function. So it will be time to see the maximum possible DPS that I can get on this Dominix. And this is basically the build that I use on my battleships, just with different weapon damage mods. But this is basically my primary PvP build for a lot of battleships that I use. The Dominix is surprisingly fast, 1.3 kilometers per second, and this is a pretty good speed for a battleship. When you click on the level 45 secondary, your drones will go 11 kilometers per second, which is enough to catch even small ships like frigates, although it is not really reliable to use with big drones, with large drones, unless you have good skills for them. And always adjust the drone orbit to be the optimal drone orbit for the drones that you're using. For these drones it's 7.5 kilometers, and I have set 7.5 kilometers so that they will be in their optimal range when they're fighting. With dual drone damage amplifiers, 3061.48 DPS. With 3, the DPS is 3340.52, and with quad, 3483.53. And when you click on the drone bomb implant, that DPS is getting tripled. So I have about 10,000, 11,000 DPS on this ship right now, and that is indeed a lot of very high DPS. The drone bombs are actually much more lethal than the barrage implant, because the drone bombs also have crazy alpha damage, and I recommend to use a wide variety of drones. Basically use 1 drone of every damage type, so that you make the reactive armor hardeners useless if your target has them. This is one of the builds that can use a different damage type on every slot for the drones. And now let's take a look at the anti-battlecruiser, anti-cruiser, and in some cases anti-frigate build. This build uses rapid missiles and medium drones. The rapid missiles are good to be used against small targets. They also do damage to big targets, but they're especially effective against small targets because their damage application is much better and their rate of fire is also much better. So let me quickly adjust the drones and all the other modules. With medium drones you will have lower DPS, but you will still do a lot of damage to most ships, and the medium drones are excellent to be used against medium-sized targets like battlecruisers, cruisers, and even against frigates. With 1 drone damage on fire, 2223.73 DPS, and they move 23 kilometers per second, which is enough to catch all ships in the game pretty fast and honestly kinda terrifying. 2,500 DPS with the second one. With the third one the DPS is 2,700, and with the last one the DPS is 2,900. With the drone bombs engaged the DPS gets tripled, so 2.9 times 3, well, equals a lot of DPS, and not a lot of cruisers will be able to withstand that, especially the cruisers in low sec, the tackle cruisers or frigates. And now let's take a look at the light drones. They have a very nice optimal range. They're also extremely quick, and they should be the fastest. Again, in order to combat reactive armor or shield hardeners, use 1 drone of every damage type on your slots. It might look messy in the window, in the module window there, but it's going to be extremely effective against targets that use reactive shield hardeners. Basically makes them useless. Okay, let's take a look at the maximum DPS with this build. Again, it will be obviously more than enough to pop a frigate. It will also be more than enough to pop the average tackle cruiser. So drone boats are very scary to tackle, especially if they use the drone bombs. 26 kilometers per second is the speed of the warriors, and you are not going to be running away from those. They will catch you. There is no running away from drones going this fast. 1,400 DPS with one. With the second one the DPS is 1,500. With the third one the DPS is 1,700, which is still really good. And with the last one the DPS is 1,700, almost 1,800, which is still plenty of DPS, and no frigate will be able to tank that. And with the drone bombs the DPS gets tripled. It's 1.7 times 3, and you can basically that's already more than enough to one-hit any frigate that can potentially tackle you. Long range frigates, no problem, 85 kilometer range on the drones, and drones are very fast as well, so you should be very safe flying this ship in low sec. You can also do a passive tank with a armor plate and a damage control. You can also slap 1 adaptive armor hardener. You have a lot of passive tank options with these ships. You can easily replicate EVE Online passive tanks. They do work really well nowadays. You can also go with dual armor plates and a damage control. This will give you a lot of armor, but it will reduce the maximum speed and maneuverability of the ship, but you still have the same drone range, and you still have about the same DPS, a little bit lower, but it will still be able to wreck any medium-sized or any small-sized ship. And now let's take a quick look at the tank. You can also do a build like this with dual plates and 1 adaptive. The ship already has good default resistance because I already gave the ship some armor resistance from the rigs. Decent 68%, 69% resistance on all damage types, and now have 753,000 hit points, 89, 89, 90 and 85, and it still has insane DPS. Overall, a tanky and a high DPS ship. You combine the best of both worlds. You get speed, tank, and DPS. Now, if you want the drones to go a bit faster, you can easily slap that drone navigation computer. They will increase your drone speed. You can use a combination like this as well. Again, works if your drones can't really catch the target. Then you can increase the speed of the drones, and those modules are also active, so you can get the drones up to a very good speed, even without the implant. And now, the Nestor. Now, you might be wondering, why am I showing you the Nestor? Well, we will do a little DPS test, and the target practice for this video will be a Nestor. Now, why Nestor? Well, mostly because the Nestor has basically one of the craziest resistances in the game, and I already have the Nestor brick tanked, so it would be a very good target practice. Now, this Nestor is absurdly tanked, and most ships that you will encounter in the game, most player ships to be more precise, are definitely not going to be running a ship that's this tanky, so it's going to give you a good opportunity to see what a Dominix with the drum bombs can do. So, let me first show you the resistance on the Nestor. So 733,000 hit points, 80,000 armor, 90, 90, 91 and 87% resistance. It will be running with the armor link module, so the damage will be further reduced. The damage control will not be able to be used because the trick that I use is kind of hilarious, although it does give me the chance to test out the ship's tank, and does give me a good, I guess, a very good way to determine what I can engage and what type of ship I can't engage. And the Nestor, this Nestor is absurdly tanked, so it will be tankier than 99% of ships that you will encounter, and if I can wreck the Nestor that's tanked through the roof, then I can easily wreck any other ship that this Dominix comes across. So, the way how you do this is you click on the speed, on the drone speed, or you basically click on the drone bombs, and then the drones are ready. You click on the amplifiers and you launch the drones. Now the ship has about 10,000 DPS, and as you can see, the shield of the Nestor went down extremely quick. However, on the armor, the damage did stop. That's because the drone bombs have stopped having a effect, because they have been wasted on the shield. But still, the Dominix is chewing away at the armor of the Nestor very easily. The adaptive armor hardeners are still running on the Nestor, so I'm basically doing the maximum possible damage that I can. Now I will retract the drones to load the drone bombs, but the armor on the Nestor, even without the drone bombs, went down pretty quickly. The shield also went down fairly fast. And now the drones have been reloaded, and yeah, now the full DPS will be unleashed, and that's still a lot of DPS on that tanky battleship. It took us about 7 or 8 minutes to destroy a Nestor that was about as tanky as this one. Maybe a little bit less tanky because that one wasn't integrated, but you can see how quick the drone bombs go through a tanky battleship. And again, this battleship is a bit more tanky than the usual battleship that you will encounter in game. That's because I built the ship, and it's built to be that tanky for this test on purpose, of course. So, plenty of DPS to play with, and definitely a very lethal ship that you can easily use for PvP. Doesn't have to be used for PvP. It can be used as a defense against pirates in low sec. The Dominix can be a perfect baiting ship. You can do the same thing with a tier 9 Dominix. This is the tier 10 one, but the tier 9 one can do the same thing, and it is actually much cheaper. So yeah, that's a very interesting tactic that you can use. And the Nestor took 144,000 hits, 144,000 damage, not hits. So overall, the ship did last as much as it was designed to last. Again, a tank build, brick tank build Nestor. Most ships are not as tanky as this, so most ships will die a lot faster. And now, a PvE build can be something like this. Basically, for high sec, you don't need to have a lot of tank. You can even replace that one adaptive into another drone damage amplifier. One armor repair and one adaptive should be enough to maintain the armor in high sec. And always make sure that your beehive inside of the drone, I mean the drone bay, is always full of drones. You never know when you have to replace them. And always carry a lot of drones, because I know from my experience, I fought so many drone boats that did not have enough drones. And drones are your primary weapon. If you lose them, you basically are probably losing your ship or the fight. Always make sure you have a lot of replacement drones. They don't have to be expensive, although it is important to have all sorts of drones in the drone bay. Especially for PvP, if players decide to kill your drones, you have to be able to replace them. And now, let's take a look at how this boat performs in a mission. So, the Dominix can technically use sentry drones, although I'm not really a fan of how sentry drones work. They have a very weird mechanic, and it is simply a lot easier to just use large, medium drones for missions. You can easily do the missions AFK, just warp at 80 kilometers and launch the drones, and then just start shooting everything that's on the grid. You can do the same thing with sentry drones, but it gets a little bit complicated when the sentry drones don't have enough range, but you have enough range. So yeah, that's why I personally prefer to use medium or large drones. They are also, I would say, much safer to use if you are in low sec, because in low sec, if you're using sentry drones, you will probably be stationary, and if you are stationary, you are going to be a very easy target. So you can't really move, although mobility and maneuverability in low sec is a lot more important than DPS and clear time. In high sec, it's not really important how tanky or how much you move. It's important to have a lot of DPS and to destroy the ships as quickly as possible. And you can do that with the medium or large drones as well. I used the medium drones for this round over here. The rapid missiles can be replaced with the normal long-range missiles if you prefer long-range combat. With a long-range build, you don't really have to do any repairing, because your drones will just go and fight while your ship will orbit at 100 or even 85 kilometers. You can increase the range with other rigs easily to 100 plus kilometers, which makes the Dominix a very good AFK PvE ship for high sec. Of course, with a different build. I don't use that build at the moment, but I prefer to have a tank. With a tank build, you can easily brawl with the ship, and since you are going to be using rapid missiles, if you're close range, the damage dealt to the targets will be much greater. After all, don't forget that the normal cruise missiles, the large missile launchers, don't really have good damage application on the small ships. So a medium range build with rapid missile launchers is probably the way to go, but again, there is a lot of other different builds that you can use. You can go with a full long range build or close range build. That's totally up to the way you like to fly the ship. Now, a lot of players ask me, why do I use missiles? Why don't I use turrets or any other weapon system? Well, that's mainly because missiles don't miss. while the projectile cannons are also really good. I don't like to use them because of their slow rate of fire and horrible tracking. They're really not that good on any other ship besides ships that have a bonus on them. Why don't I use lasers? Well, lasers use capacitors, and in some cases you will need that capacitor, so I try to keep the capacitor intact for armor repairs like cooperative afterburners or things like that. Same can be said about the railguns, they also use capacitor. So that leaves us with the missile launchers. Technically decomposers are there as well, but decomposers also use capacitor, so the only weapon system, well, the two only weapon systems that you can technically use are the turrets, the projectile turrets and the missile launchers. They don't use capacitor. Although since the projectile turrets have horrible tracking, I personally prefer to use the missile launchers, and that's why I prefer to use missile launchers on basically any drone boat in the game. I used to run decomposers on the RB in PvP a long time ago. It was running well at the time, but you know, a lot of things change over time. The builds change, the builds evolve, and I ended up using the missile launchers on the RB as well. Even today I use the missile launchers on the RB, basically missile launchers on all ships that use drones as their primary weapon. Although you can use the high slots for basically anything. You can basically go with a remote armor repair build. You can make the Dominix repair your own drones. Can be a very interesting build in PvP. Basically you can go and get the remote shield or remote armor implants, although not necessarily all, well, everything that I'm talking about here is usable without any implant. And while you PvP, you can lock your own drones as well as the target, and then you can remote repair your own drones if they are taking damage. So you really have a lot of options to do with the high slots. The Nestor does the same thing. The Nestor even has a bonus on remote armor repairs. So the high slots are basically utility slots that can house weapons or remote armor repairs or even remote capacitor telemeters in a fleet. So you can do a lot of different combinations on these drone modes. Now, the main issue with drone modes was that they used to be very bugged. Now, I used to have a couple bugs happen to me, and ever since one of the patches a couple weeks ago, ever since that patch happened, basically I didn't have any problems with drones. They listen to the commands really well, but always pay close attention to what the drones are doing, because sometimes I think they still can glitch out, so make sure that the drones are not glitching. If they do, retract them or warp away. Although they should perform really well. And the other difference, which makes them different from the other weapon types, is that they don't do as much DPS, although they are one of the best PvE weapons, and I would say nowadays with the drone bombs, one of the best PvP weapons in the game. With the drone bombs you basically delete ships with the status. You decloak next to them, unload the bombs, and they die before they can blink. That's what the drone bombs are doing at the moment. I believe that's going to be changed, that's going to be nerfed very soon. After all, the April balance patch is around the corner, and since they do a balance patch every April or around that time, I expect the changes to be quite dramatic. But again, we will see what will happen. Now you can, I'm swapping to the large drones here just to show you how they work. You can use medium or large drones. Again, totally up to the skills that you have, totally up to the way you like to fly the ship. In my case, I personally prefer medium drones, but the large drones are also very nice, especially since they can track, and this ship does get a tracking bonus on all drones. So even the large drones will be able to do some damage. With the large drones, with the right build, of course, you can even hit the small targets, especially if they decide to weapon scramble you to get close. That's why the large neutralizer and weapon scramble are important, because ships that are slowed down and scrambled are not going to be that difficult to hit, and even large drones will be able to damage to these ships. So even the large drones with the right tactic, with the right skills, can be used against smaller targets. Sentry drones have horrible tracking, and up close sentry drones are not going to hit anything. So if you plan on going into low sec, don't use sentry drones, because if you get tackled you will have basically no defense. And if the pirate manages to ram you away from the drones, you are not going to be able to retract the drones to launch medium or small ones, because you have to be really close to the sentry drones in order to load them back into the ship, because they are not moving, they are stationary. And if you can't scoop them back in, you might be in a lot of trouble. So that's why the sentry drones are not really, you know, I don't really recommend to use them in low sec. For high sec, sure, but in low sec, no sec, no. Perhaps in low sec if you are somewhere far away inside of your own sovereignty or territory where you know that you are safe, but in low sec or in low sec where a pirate can just pop in and engage you, I would not use the sentry drones, because of the fact that if you are away from them you can't really scoop them back in. And of course the way how they work is a little bit funky as well, so I don't like how the sentry drones work, and I expect the sentries to be changed at one point, or I expect some of the game's mechanics to be drastically changed in the very near future. There are indications that something like that will happen. There is definitely there are signs on the road that show that something big will be changed in the game very soon. I'm just not really sure what's going to happen, but something big will probably happen probably very soon, although I could be wrong. Not really sure when the balance patch will arrive, but it's definitely around the corner. And well, how do I like the Dominix? Well, it's a very interesting boat, definitely became a lot more lethal after the drone bombs have been released. Even the tier 9 Dominix can do some serious damage, and overall, if you like to use drones, if you like drone boats, then I would say the Dominix or the Dominix 2 are good and valid choices. They have excellent PvP capabilities, they also have excellent PvE capabilities, they have good DPS, they can have a very solid tank. You can make the ship a full and active armor tank if you like, although since the Dominix is meant to be used as a sniper, a build like that can work, but all that repair would be wasted at range. Although again, if you get tackled, then you can live for a while until the drones actually come back, and then you can send the drones to the target and you can kill the target fairly easily. Alright, well, it was a very nice and lovely little run with the Dominix. Again, the space potato or space whale or the space shoe, that depends, you know, which nickname you actually like more, is a very interesting boat. Definitely something that definitely a ship that is worth flying, and I would say a very enjoyable experience as well. So with that being said, hope that you enjoyed. As always, I love you all. If you would like to support me, feel free to like and subscribe. And with that being said, stay safe, fly safe, and I'll see you next time.